Hi, I'm Robert. I come to you as an automobile enthusiast that has maintained, serviced, and repaired my own vehicles in excess of 30 years. I currently drive a car with over 230,000 miles on it, and I once had a car that had over 400,000 miles on it and ran very well. While you're watching the video, please watch a step or two ahead. Sometimes the current step is better explained in the next step or two. Also, like, share, subscribe. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you benefit from the information. If you listen real close, you can hear the bearing on this car whopping. It's normally when you're going real slow, you can hear whoop, 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 whoop. And then as you speed up, it speeds up with the car. And as you're going highway speeds, it's a real fast, rhythmatic, low pitch sound normally. And when it gets really bad, you can actually feel it grinding through the steering wheel. So I'm getting ready to change the bearing on this 850. We'll listen one more time, see if you can hear it. Okay, I'm going to give you some words of wisdom on this bearing job. A couple things you want to do before you dig in is, if you know you got a bearing to replace, inspect the suspension. You want to check out your control arm, your ball joints, your trailing arm links. You want your sway bar end links, and especially your CV joints. I have a bad CV joint, so I'm going to have to come back in here later and redo this part of this job. And then I have a bad brake line. So inspect those parts before you dig into this job so that you can get all this stuff done at once. Here are the tools I believe you'll need for the job. I have some thread tight, so when I put the new bearing on, I won't have to worry about the thread coming loose. You want some rope or string to tie your caliper up and maybe your axle up out of the way. I got some sockets. I got a 13, a 14, a 15, 16, and 17, and my 3/4 inch ratchet. Little extension, little cheater bar, couple pair of gloves. I got the torque wrench. I got my box end wrenches. I think I'll need the 15 and the 13 and the 14 out of that. I got new bolts for the bearing because the old bolts I suspect are going to be rusted. I had to pick up a set of the star sockets because they're used to get those bolts out. Mine, I believe, is a number 16, but I've heard of them being smaller, as low as 14. I got my 4-foot cheater bar to help me break loose my axle nut. I got my 36 millimeter socket. I got a 1/2 inch breaker bar. I got my Allen screw for getting the caliper off. Regular flat tip screwdriver, knee pad, a 19 millimeter socket, my jack stand, my jacks. I got the bearing, some PB blaster that I try to spray on a day ahead of time, and then a crowbar. So if I have any tools other than this that I need, I'll let you know. First thing you want to do is park the car on the level surface and set the parking brake. Next thing you want to do is put something in front of and behind the opposite wheel from which you're going to be removing and changing the bearing on. Next thing I'm going to do is break this nut loose off of the axle. It's best to do that when the car is on the ground. So you want to take the flat tip screwdriver, remove that hubcap, and then put your cheater on your breaker bar, put your socket in there, and break that loose. My nut broke loose relatively easy, so that's how you do it. Get that broke loose. Next thing you want to do is break the lug nuts loose before you jack the car up. Next you want to put your jack in place, jack up the car. On these 850s, they're known to have bad jacks, so make sure your jack is in good condition. This jack will jack up the whole side of the car. Once you get the car jacked up, we want to put the jack stand in place. I normally put the jack stand right there where that little adapter is, and let the car down on it so you can start removing the wheel. After the car is jacked up, you go ahead and remove the wheel. Since you have the wheel off, it's a good time to check your front lower motor mount. So you pull this little plastic nut right here and you fold the skirt back, and you can see that front lower motor mount right there, whether it's blown or not. I knew mine was replaced not too long ago, so mine is in good shape. Let you take a little peek at my brake lines. As you can see, they are broken, cracked, and need to be replaced. So I'm going to order a set of braided steel brake lines. Before you do this job, it's always a good idea to check your suspension parts and brake lines. As you've seen, I had a brake line bad. Now I got a CV boot bad. So I probably should have had a CV boot rebuild kit handy, so I could have went on ahead and rebuilt that. So I'll be back here within the next month or two to rebuild that CV boot. But check these suspension parts, your end links and stuff like that, your tie rod ends, before you get in here, and learn that you got to replace this stuff shortly after doing this bearing job. Next thing I'm going to do is remove the caliper. So I'm going to stick a screwdriver in there and pry the brake pads a little bit loose, and then remove those two caliper bolts, and I'm going to tie that caliper up on the strut spring so that it doesn't hang down and damage the brake lines. It's a good time to check the brake lines. A lot of times they're cracked. So I got two caliper bolts there and there with 15mm socket. My caliper bolts was pretty tight, so I broke them loose with a 1/2 inch 15mm. Then I'll take them the rest of the way out with the 3/8 inch. Well, I went to pull that lower caliper bolt out, and I thought I broke it loose with my 1/2 inch, but it looks like my socket split. So I'm going to put a box-in combination on there with a cheater and break that lower caliper bolt loose so I can get that caliper out. Okay, I got my caliper tied out of the way. Next thing I'm going to do is unplug the ABS sensor. So it's right there. I'm going to go ahead and unplug it. Hopefully I'll get that out of the way and not damage it in all this process. Okay, I got my ABS sensor wire tucked out of the way. Next thing I want to do is pull the rotor off. I think that's a 10mm. You pull that pin out, set the rotor to the side. Okay, I got the rotor out and set to the side, and that's the pin that holds the rotor on. That's all there is to it. Now that the bolts are exposed, the threads for the bearing, go ahead and PB blaster those so that can start penetrating while you're waiting to get to that step. The next step, you got kind of a decision to make. You need to get to these bolts on the back of the bearing, and it's easier to do that, of course. The only way to do that is get the axle loose and out of the way. But you got to decide what you're going to do with your control arm. Some people take the two bolts out of the frame for the control arm. Some people take the bolt loose that holds in the ball joint of the control arm. Fortunate for me, I have the control arm with the removable ball joints, so I'm just going to take those 3 bolts loose there and leave my ball joint in the bottom of that, and that should free me up so that I can get my axle out. Okay, I got the 3 nuts off the control arm that hold the ball joint in place. Now that control arm is loaded level, so it's just not going to fall off and let that fall out. So now I'm going to take the nut off the end of the axle and try to work these parts apart so that I can get at those nuts on the back of that bearing. Okay, I got the axle nut off. I'm going to work on getting this axle out of here and getting this control arm loose. Okay, I separated the control arm from the ball joint. I pushed the axle out, so the axle's out of the way of those star nuts now. So now I can get the bearing loose from the star nuts in there, and then I hook the the control arm back into its socket there to hold the assembly in place. Now I'm going to remove those 4 bolts to get the bearing out. Okay, I decided to break them all loose with the 1/2 inch with a 3/8 adapter on it. Now I'm going to pull them all out with the ratchet wrench. Okay, now that I got all 4 bolts out of the hub, I'm going to tap it with a hammer to knock it out of there. Took a little more tapping than I thought to get it out of there, and I even had to use that pry bar to tap in the seam and get that out of there. Now I'm going to clean that up with a wire brush. Probably put some anti-seize there just as a maybe lubricant or some kind of grease. Maybe it won't rust next time. And then I'm going to set the other one in place and bolt it in. I wanted you to go ahead and hear what this bad bearing sounds like when it's been removed. I hope you could hear the bearings moving around in there. That should be a tight, smooth, quiet motion, and it shouldn't be that easy to do. Okay, now that I got the bearing out, the area cleaned up, I'm going to put some anti-seize in the hole of where these bolts go, and I'm going to put some anti-seize along here. You could do that or axle grease. Then the tips of these bolts that's sticking out, I'm going to put thread locks on them, set that bearing in place, and then bolt it down. Okay, I got everything ready to go back on. I'm not sure if this bearing can go on 2 ways or not, so I'm going to get all 4 screws started with some Loctite on them before I tighten any of them down. And I know these are far apart, but I don't know if these have different widths or not. So I'm going to go ahead and set it up there and get a screw started and put some Loctite on the thread. Okay, I got all 4 bolts in, got them torqued down with anti-lock on the threads to 80 foot-pounds. I'll double check, see if that's a right torque value on it. Now I'm going to separate the control arm again and put the axle in and tighten that nut down some and start working everything back together. Okay, I got the control arm loose. I got the axle started, so I'm going to start the nut on there just so that axle doesn't back out. Then I'm going to get the control arm aligned back up and bolt that control arm together. Okay, I got the bolts in the bottom of the control arm. I torqued them down to 25 foot-pounds. Now I'm cranking the axle bolt in. Then I'll put the rotor on. Okay, I got the axle bolt snug. I'm not going to torque it down until I get the wheel on the ground, but it is snug. And now I'm going to put the hub on and put that pin in it, the rotor. I got the rotor on. It's secured on by the pin and all the holes are aligned. I'm going to go ahead and put the caliper on with those 15mm bolts. And I'm not going to put Loctite on those because I got to pull all this stuff back off when I do the boots here within the next 30 days. So I'm going to just tighten those caliper bolts down to about 75 foot-pounds. Got the caliper in place. Now I'm going to reach back here and get my ABS wire and put it back in. If you forget to put this in and you start this car, you'll probably throw an ABS code that you're not going to be able to clear. So I'm going to go ahead and plug that in and then put the wheel on. I got my ABS plugged in. I'm going to cut that string off that was hanging that caliper. Then I'm going to go ahead and put my wheel on. Put some anti-seize on the mating surface of the lug nuts that'll hold the wheel against there. I'm not going to tighten the wheel down, torque it down, until I get the wheel on the ground a little bit. Okay, I got the wheel on with the lug nuts finger tight. Now I'm going to go ahead and raise the car, remove the jack stand, and then I'm going to lower the car down until the wheel makes good contact. Then I'm going to torque the wheel down. Okay, I got the wheel on the ground, I went on ahead and tightened up the lug nuts. I think you're supposed to torque them to 75 or 85 foot-pounds. You do it in a star pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, then 5. Now I'm going to lower the car the rest of the way down, and I'm going to tighten up that axle bolt. Okay, I went on ahead and torqued the axle bolt down and put the hubcap on. That's it. I think it might have took me 2 hours. Somebody else could probably do it in an hour and a half. Thanks for watching. If you feel that this information was beneficial, please like it and share it with your social media friends. You can also subscribe to my channel so that you can get notification of future videos that I post. Visit my channel. I have all types of do-it-yourself videos there. You can leave questions here and I'll try to respond to them as quick as possible. You can also visit my website at robertspinner.com. Thanks again for watching.